Binoy Mascarenhas is a senior of mine from the Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics. He's a very, very, very good friend. But the most apt and appropriate description of Binoy in the context in which you are going to be listening from him over the course of whatever number of episodes the series turns out to be is that he's an excellent urban planner. Urban planning and the phenomenon of urbanization has always interested me as an economist for a very long time. There have been some remarkably good books that I have read about urbanization that have made me want to learn more about the subject. There are excellent online resources, TED Talks, courses on Coursera, on edX, whatever it may be, that I have tried to take a look at in terms of teaching myself better urbanization or better things about urbanization. But I would argue the thing that has helped me the most in terms of learning and thinking about urbanization, especially how I might be wrong about aspects of urbanization, is when I argue with Binoy. And in an attempt more to teach myself about urbanization, but also hopefully introduce to all of you various views, various aspects, various nuances of urbanization, I asked Binoy if he would be willing to be a sort of a guinea pig in this experiment where I ask him to teach me and therefore you about urbanization. In the course of the first talk that you're about to see, which will last for about 40 odd minutes, he and I speak about the outline of the series that is going to follow. Take a look at this video, take a look at how he thinks about urbanization, and in the upcoming episodes, what we will do is we will break down each of those elements that we speak about today and therefore A, teach ourselves a little bit more about urbanization, I more than him. And through the process of this conversation that we'll have and record, hopefully you guys will get to learn a little bit more about urbanization as well. The series will evolve as we go along. Feel free to send in your questions both to Binoy and me, and we'll try and incorporate these questions in this particular series. But the idea is to learn about cities, why they are so very fantastic, and how we need to think very, very carefully about how to get cities right. Alright, I'm not a big believer in big introductions, so that's Binoy Mascarenhas. Please enjoy the conversation that is about to follow. Thank you for listening. Mr. Mascarenhas, what's up?
Not much, you tell me.
So, how are things in Canada, man? Is there still what do you guys call it? Is it a lockdown? Is it stay at home orders, quarantine? How does it work?
I mean, so we have the lockdown, but it's probably not as serious as it is in India right now. We are allowed to go out. We're supposed to maintain social distancing. It's somewhat voluntary, and yeah, it's okay. We're getting on.
And is it being practiced or are orders being
To a large
followed?
extent, yes. I mean, I think we're doing pretty all right. At least the province where I am in, British Columbia, we have just a handful of cases on right now. We haven't had a death for a long time. I mean,
Oh,
it's good in some extent. We didn't get hit as badly as some of the other provinces, but yeah, but you're never out of this until you're completely out of it, right? So there is still that fear, and most people are following rules, so I think it's okay, yeah, for the most part. At least we're getting to go out. We're going to go for our walks, do our things. So yeah, that's fine.
okay. So, in the introduction, which you haven't seen yet, I've talked up your urbanization game, and that's
Oh
one thing
yeah.
that I want to speak about in relation to COVID. Is there lesser urban density when you go to shop or go out for a walk or
So the thing with this COVID, right, is that okay, it's a bummer for the whole world, but
Hmm?
it's an entirely different kind of bummer for people like me who are in this sustainable urban development uh, place who promote these cities, because the principles that we are promoting for sustainable urban development are just the kind of principles you would want to not promote to control COVID, right? Because the things that we say are important are transit, which
Yeah,
obviously now everybody is
screwed.
driving towards this.
Yeah.
The second thing is densities. I mean, one of the most important principles of the sustainable and the modern urbanization paradigm is about increasing densities, and COVID's completely changing that. So we want to at one point obviously acknowledge the larger health implications of all of this, but it's a fear that we ourselves don't know what to do with. It's an uncertainty of how to respond to this, because a lot of the principles and a lot of the good practices that we've been advocating for the last I don't know how many ever years have suddenly we need to have a second look about because of what COVID recommendations are now going to be like. So I hope we find a cure for COVID soon enough so that we can go back to saying what we've always been saying. But yeah, let's
Somewhere
have
in the universe, Robert Moses is having the time of his life.
it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure about it because I mean, though, yeah, I mean, yeah, because a lot of what they have, I know it's a hard thing to admit, but yeah, I think a lot of what they have recommended for the longest time seems to be one of the ways to tackle with COVID. But having said this, I just want to talk about New York specifically, and uh, I'm forgetting the lady now who used to
Jane
head the.
Jacobs.
No, 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 not the lady who heads the New York TTT. I'm forgetting her name right now, but she just put out an article that said that surprisingly, the New York Transit turns out not to be a hotspot for COVID, even though New York has had such a high amount of COVID cases. So you
Hmm.
would have imagined that a lot of these cases were being transmitted through their metro, which is the New York subway.
Yeah.
But it's apparently not been a hotspot for COVID, and so that's some good news. I don't know why that is the case because you would imagine that it's very difficult to do social distancing in transit systems.
Right.
But yeah, that's what it's turned out to be.
Okay, so let's uh, work our way backwards. We started speaking about COVID and how things are screwed in
Yeah.
Vancouver, in Pune, which is where I'm recording this from, and the world over for that matter. But the reason I wanted to start with is because the whole world speaks of something about COVID these days. But
Absolutely.
there's a bit of a tension between, like you said, what you advocate under normal circumstances and what people are advocating right now. But
Hmm.
let's speak a little bit about why you advocate why whatever it is that you do when it comes to urbanization. But let's begin by speaking about urbanization itself. If you had to explain what urbanization is to, say, for example, a 7 year old, my daughter, for example, how would you explain what a city is and what makes it special?
Hmm. It's a big question to answer, uh, especially if I'm trying to put it in the words for a 7-year-old. But I would think primarily if you look at urbanization, it's just a recent understanding of human settlements growing, right? That we start off with something like a village and it grows and grows, and at some point we say this is now big enough to be a city. Of
Hmm.
course, there are technical definitions about the amount of employment that is non-agricultural and all of that, but there is no hard and fast rule as to when a settlement becomes an urban area. And that's actually important when you're talking about urbanization, which happens along the periphery of an existing urban area. So it's initially a district like, say, a Noida that was even 10 years back or 15 years back, a village, right? And it was
Right.
a village, and then a few buildings started emerging out there. And today, if you go to Noida, nobody's going to call that a village anymore. So that urbanization process is a continuous paradigm that is happening, and it will continue to happen as it is. Yeah,
I don't think a 7 year old would have got all of the words that you just used. But let me
I
back up
know.
and use the first word that you used. You said a village growing and eventually turning into a city. Forget the technical definition, like you
Yeah.
said, agriculture, non agriculture. Let's not get into that, at least in this call. But when you say grow, what do you mean? Are we talking about the number of people in the village? Are we talking about the boundary of the village? Are we talking about both?
A bit of both and a little more. So one is obviously the size getting larger and accommodating more people. But another factor that clearly differentiates a city from a village settlement is the densities of those people living together. And this has been true from time immemorial. So even if you're talking about the old cities of Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and later down the line, even the Romes and the old Delhis, they had a much higher density of people than the rural areas around them. And what's important about densities is that the moment people start living in close proximity to each other, it spurs other kinds of innovations that are not as conducive in a rural environment, right? So you spur innovations in new technologies, new inventions, new ideas, develop ideas like democracy, ideas like elections, ideas like the Renaissance. All of that happens because people are living in close proximity to each other. They bounce off their ideas and information against each other. And that's what actually allows these things to grow. So if you didn't have cities, you wouldn't have much of civilization, really. And it's an interesting way of looking at it. And again, I'm not trying to bring the COVID lens in it, and I know a lot of that distancing recommendations that come in. We have to also think it from that lines, right? I mean, at some point, uh, you can do certain things through digital interaction, but at some point, you do have to have that interaction for this real spurring of ideas and innovations to happen, which is possible in cities.
So you spoke about how you don't want to speak about COVID, but any young person who is going to be growing up in 2020 is going to learn more about social distancing than he or she is likely to learn about non-social distancing, which is pretty much yours definition and my definition of what a city is. Proximity is what defines a city. It's the fact
One
that
is
people live in. Mhm.
Why did I hope not? I mean, I'm being an eternal optimist when I say this. I hope that this is a problem that we will see out in a year or two. We have to
Mhm.
see that even the Spanish flu 100 years ago. I mean, this is
About 3 years it lasted, yeah.
one data point. Yeah, it lasted 3 years. It killed a lot of people, but it didn't significantly change uh, too much about the way society was moving. Granted, we were just through a war, so the things were a lot more different, and then it was followed by a big recession. But having said that, I mean, I hope that COVID doesn't change a lot of things, and I'm being optimistic here. But if it does, at its very core, we cannot eliminate what cities are. I know people are talking about a lot of this work from home and a lot of these ideas, which are important. They're important in the short run and they will help us. But as of today's technology, 90% of jobs cannot be done by working from home, right? I mean, you're going to have to, at some point, there are lots of employment that has to require that the person physically goes to another place to do his or her work. I mean, if you're working in the manufacturing sector, if you're working in a restaurant, if you're working in essential services, hospitals, all of that, right? So you can't do everything working from home. So that necessitates some kind of semblance of a city still existing. And we're just going to figure out our way around COVID, but we cannot sidestep on the fact that a city, the way it currently is, cannot change till we all start getting whatever hooked into some virtual reality. But till that point of time, cities will continue to exist the way it does right now.
So the whole host of articles that I have read, I'm sure you have as well, about how our understanding of how people work and how people live is likely to change because of the coronavirus, and how new centers might emerge where people choose to work rather than the main centers.
The
You're saying all
problem
of that is likely to not happen.
is the people who are writing these articles are the people who can afford to work from home, Ashish. You think about it, right? I mean, you and I, we are, our output is knowledge. Our output can be shared through a laptop, right? But that is not true for the majority of people. And not just, I'm not talking about India, I'm talking about even in a country like Canada, a lot of employment, and this is not marginal, this is the majority of employment, cannot be done from home. It requires you to physically go to another location. So you and I working from home is good. We're helping, doing our part in helping keep the cases down, but
Yeah.
it's only a small subsection of the larger population that needs to go out there. So that's my response. The people who write these articles, who talk about the things that are going to change, yes, it'll change for you and me. It'll change for them who are writing the article, but not anyone else who doesn't work in front of a laptop.
So let's use a city that you used to stay in earlier before you moved to Canada, Bombay.
Mm. Yeah.
This is, in a sense, off the top of my head, and feel free to not quote any numbers, or these numbers may even not be available. But as a rough estimate of the number of people who live in Bombay, what percentage approximately might have to depend on physical interactions for a livelihood? Is there
So
any way of calculating that, or even a
I won't be
guesstimate?
so ambitious to throw a number, but I would definitely say it is more than 50%.
Wow.
Without, yeah, without, because I can explain this to you. Simply put, like this is the people who can afford to work from home. Tell me what
Hmm.
are the kinds of jobs that they're doing? It's mainly white collared, right? It's
White collar service center job. I mean, not service center, sorry,
service
service sector jobs. Yeah.
service sector, white
White
collar, and
collar.
only in the even service sector. The service sector also includes your restaurants and your retail and all
Yeah,
of that, and they
correct.
can't work from
Yes.
home. It's only service sector of consultancies and things like that. So I would not. I would imagine this would be, I would even say it less than 5% if you ask me, because a lot of the employment numbers, if you look, right, if I just look at transportation numbers as a benchmark,
Hmm.
uh, you'd be surprised to know this is, but uh, if you have to give a guess, what is the percentage share of car users in Mumbai? Like, give a guess of that number.
Um, I would say around car users or car owners.
So basically, the mode share in Mumbai, okay, mode share in Mumbai for cars, just for cars is by the most optimistic
Hmm.
estimate is around 8%. By a more realistic estimate, it's around 2%, right?
Wow, I was going to guess
Yeah.
20, so I would have been kind of out the mark.
No, because at UT Supply, a lot of trips are actually done on foot. They're pedestrianized trips. A lot of trips are walking. The majority is between public transport, paratransit, and all of that, and a bit of it is motorcycle as well. So what I'm trying to make is the point is that the people who can afford to work from home are generally these car users. So you can
Hmm.
use it as sort of a surrogate of people who will work from home versus people who will not. So almost everybody who travels in your trains, barring probably the first class compartment from Ville Parle to Churchgate. Apart from that section, I think everybody else are not in a position to work from home. It's for them. It's not an option of doing their duty. It's feed your family or live with the risk. I mean, it's basically as simple as that. And I don't think it's going to work without bringing them to the table and making them also part of this decision on whether to promote work from home or not.
So I have a whole host of things that I would like to say about the kind of job that I do and how it is much better done in a physical sense in a classroom rather than offline.
Absolutely,
So we
yeah.
can get into conversations about how you pick up uh, non-verbal gestures to figure out whether people are understanding what
Absolutely.
you're saying. All of that matters. But also, it's about something that you spoke about earlier in this call: the value of networks that you develop in a city. That happens through chance conversations, bumping into people in the
Mm.
street. Maybe you meet them at a bar, in a restaurant, or whatever it is. I think you spoke about it as the exchange of ideas. But really, that is what a city is. When you put a lot of people in close juxtaposition to each other, just the fact that a lot of people are literally bumping off against each other, and you know what I mean when I say that,
Absolutely. Yeah,
is worth its weight in gold. That's urbanization.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we share germs, but we also share ideas as well. So I mean, that's the trade-off. If you want to keep the virus away, you're going to also limit those interactions. And at some point, we have to make that judgment call. I agree. Right now, we have to put all our efforts towards controlling COVID.
Yeah.
But should that be changing the way we think about how cities should develop? I don't know yet, but I still think it's uh, we're very early in this game to know that for sure. But right now, I would lean to let's wait it out. I don't would not like urbanists to make any drastic changes in what they've been preaching just because of COVID. Let's wait it, give it some more time. Maybe in 6 months, I might come around and say yes, we have to change. We have to go back to whatever Moses was saying about the way cities should develop. But who knows? Let's see.
So we've thrown about some names and some terms, Robert Moses being one of them, and in later videos we'll get to exactly who Robert Moses was and why we made the kind of joke that we did about him. But before that, let's back up a little bit. And okay, all right, at least you and I, and hopefully some of our viewers are agreed upon the fact that urbanization is on balance a good thing, except under special circumstances such as the one that we are going through right
Yeah.
now. But if you take quite literally the last 100 years, then only twice in the last 100 years has it been the case that you would not want to be in a city. The
Yeah.
remaining 98 years, it would have been a much better bet to stay in a city
Mhm.
precisely because employment opportunities are so much more in a
Absolutely.
city.
Yeah.
In fact, another name that I'll throw in the mix right now, and we can speak about him later. Alain Berthaud has a book where he says that cities are essentially labor markets. That's
Hmm.
one way of thinking
Yeah.
about cities. But okay, let's move on to a slightly more complicated topic. If we accept the argument that cities are on balance good, one of the first principles that I learned and teach in economics is that of opportunity cost. So, with the good comes a bad. And if
Hmm.
you have cities which are good, what are the prices that we pay for staying in a city in terms of a whole variety of things? So, in terms of how complicated transport can get, in terms of how messy cities can get, in terms of garbage collection, garbage accumulation, what are the 5 or 6 things that you think any student of urbanization needs to think about in terms of what are the problems that urbanization tends to throw up?
So I think one essential thing is obviously the environmental implications of urbanization. Definitely, because as we concentrate our living together, we also
Mm.
concentrate the problems that we create, right? So the garbage creation, and the problem that it creates is exponential when it's concentrated. So if the same population is spread out and is creating that pollution, it doesn't have as much impact as when we are all together. The best point is obviously landfills, right? I mean, a rural thing can actually spread out that landfill, or sewage can actually be spread out into septic tanks, and it does no damage. In fact, it actually nourishes the soil when septic tanks are spread out. But when you actually have it concentrated, it causes all the problems. So yes, that is definitely a point, and that so there is a sweet spot of where density is good, and people disagree on what that sweet spot is, and obviously that changes as technology changes, and it changes in context as well. But by and large, if you ask me, for a South Asian city, uh, densities what we see in Dharavi and certain parts of Mumbai, those are too high. They're definitely not sustainable, and they're just not what you want. But at the same time, densities for me in the South Asian context, something like a Chandigarh is way too low. So you have to strike that balance somewhere between these two extremes. And I don't know what that right number is. For me, I think it's somewhere around 15,000 per square kilometer. That is my estimate for a South Asian context. It'll be a very different recommendation for some city in North America. But yeah, I think that's where we would ideally should aim for. Mumbai, I think, sits around 25, 26,000. I think it's a little too high. But Pune is, I don't know, it's probably closer to that density.
Oh,
Uh,
50,000 per square kilometer.
I'm not sure about Pune, but I know Mumbai is
Numbers
close
aren't
to
important right now. We'll
yeah,
get to the numbers later. So one thing you spoke about was environmental concerns, and maybe we
yeah.
can spend a little bit of time talking about environmental concerns in the next episode. The other is you spoke about urban density. Let
Hmm.
me speak about one thing that I thought of when you spoke about urban density. It's not so much urban density, and I'm using a little bit of statistics now. It's not so much about uniform urban density, but it's also is about how within a city you want certain parts to have a slightly higher urban density and other parts within the same city to have a slightly lower one. So Central Park in New
Absolutely,
York
yeah.
being a classic example, but it's not just uh, urban density spread by space, but also diffused by time. And what I
Yeah.
mean by that is you want certain parts of the city to be more heavily populated during certain times of the day, but not so much others. Or is that so? I'm
Actually,
thinking of this
no.
neighborhood. So
Actually,
this is where I think a lady called Jane Jacobs comes into play.
yes, and it's a good point because this was at one point of time a very strong recommendation. I don't know if we can put that back to Moses, but definitely the people who are from his school of thought uh, actually promoted this concept of the downtown, right? So downtown is an area which have had all the concentration of jobs, the
Yeah,
white collar commercial sector, service sector jobs, that would see a huge influx of people into the downtown during the daytime. So your daytime population densities would really spike up, and in the night, completely the opposite, right?
right.
And the advantage of that is one is that it helps the concentration of people together, and all the things that we just talked about, the exchange of ideas and all of that that can happen when people are concentrated. That is one advantage. The second advantage is obviously a lot of the amenities and infrastructure that you need to service a sector. It's able to service a lot more people if the densities are higher, right? So you have your one transit hub closely located, your one whatever your malls and your restaurants. And so all of those things definitely benefit from density. The disadvantage of doing something like that is in the evening, those districts become deserted to an extent that they even crime hubs, right?
Correct.
A lot
Become
of these
dangerous. Yes.
downtowns, including the Vancouver downtown, I feel unsafe in the evenings because it's a completely different place, and that's not exactly what people from my ideas now advocate. You want a more decentralized kind of development because there are also advantages of decentralizing that development. The biggest advantage is that which is what we've realized as cities have grown bigger, is that your transportation problems and your traffic jams and all of those congestion problems that get created become significantly lesser when you have that multi-centric development. And many cities have tried to move towards that model, Mumbai has tried it with developing the Lower Parels and the Bandra Kurla and all of that, but to a large extent, we are still very much a downtown centric way of thinking about development, which is not a good thing in my opinion.
Okay. So we've spoken about one thing that we want to speak about is the environmental impact of urbanization. Second is about densities. The third is about a term that we haven't defined yet, but mixed use neighborhoods, which means
Yeah,
effectively
absolutely.
speaking, density that may differ uh, within an overall aggregate urban density.
Not just density, even the land use that you allow and permit. Like, if you look at certain sectors of the city, like Dwarka in Delhi, right? It was this
Okay.
new development, relatively new development that was
Yeah.
allowed to happen. If you live in one of these high rises in the Dwarka sector of Delhi, and you just want to buy bread, okay, you have to take your car out almost
Right.
always because there is no small little shop outside your house to go and buy bread. That's not the kind of development you want to happen, right? So when you have these, and these are these archaic ideas of development planning where they have these huge swaths of colors that they would assign to the map and say this entire zone is going to be yellow. Yellow is a color assigned for a residential land use. So it makes the entire thing a residential neighborhood with absolutely nothing in walking distance. So
Correct.
even something like to just buy bread or to get milk, you need to take your car out. So that is the problem. So it's not just about density because Dwarka has very high density. So by density, it's good, but by the other part of it is also the mix of land use, which is extremely important, and that is unfortunately missing. That actually is where Pune got it right. I mean, if you see a lot of the new development that has happened in Aund and Baner and even further down, there is a bit of a mix of residential, retail, commercial, all in close proximity. So I think Pune, I know you like to critique Pune's urban development, but not everything that they did was,
I think
was
the critic it so long as I'm in Pune. The minute I move out of Pune to some other city in India, I fall in love with Pune all over again. So I guess
yeah,
it's all
yeah. So some things
relative.
they definitely got right in the way it was done. I don't know whether it was by design or by accident, but
Hmm.
Pune has a lot more mixed land use in its new developments than even Mumbai, if you ask me. But definitely much more than Delhi. If you look at how the developments around Gurgaon, Noida are, they're awful. I mean, really bad.
Okay, I'll come back to the list that we're building for the future episodes in just a couple of seconds. But given
Yeah.
what we spoke about right now, there's one question I would love to ask you, and this is particularly for people from India who are listening. Off the top of your head, give me your top three cities that you think have done urbanization really well in India, and the cities that, according to you, have done just a abysmally horrible job of it.
Okay, I'm going to start with the second category, and I'm going to choose a city which is obviously not the worst city in the list. There are definitely cities worse than this, but the reason why I choose this city is because it's often quoted as an example of a great city, and you already know what I'm going to talk about, right? It's Chandigarh, and the reason why I say choose Chandigarh because okay, let me first say it's not the worst city in India to live in. It's a very nice city,
Good
but the
food, I'll give
reason
it that.
but the reason why I choose Chandigarh is because the influence that Chandigarh has had, the bad influence rather that Chandigarh has had on the way greenfield urban development is happening all across India. So Chandigarh has influenced the development of Gandhinagar, Bhubaneswar, Guwahati, all of these new capitals that got developed. Naya Raipur, another example.
Amravati, I
And
think, is another one.
Amravati, yeah, but I think Amravati is now canned. The new government has
Correct.
decided that they don't want it anymore. But either
But the
so
same spirit, right? It's the same
yeah,
idea.
the same thing, the same influence, and so this is a classic case of. I mean, and I don't want to be Narendra Modi here and go again and say that this all Nehru's fault, but this is a classic case of Nehru saying, okay, let's trust a European to come to India and make a plan without even understanding what India is and what how India moves. So Corbusier came, he made his great plan for Chandigarh, but if you see Chandigarh, right, and I want to talk about Chandigarh and compare it with Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. This sounds like a stupid thing to do, but hear me out, right?
Hmm.
So Mohenjo-daro, a city 5,000 years old, in in many ways introduced the grid system uh,
Yeah.
of urbanization. And just for your listeners, what a grid system is basically when you lay your streets out in right angles so that your residential blocks almost form squares or rectangles around it, right? And this grid system has many advantages in the way of helping the movement of traffic and people. It allows you to get from one place to the other in the quickest possible way. It allows of multiple uh, alternate routes in case one route is closed. You can take another route. So it's all in all a better way for traffic circulation and traffic spreading out. And this model has been replicated not just in Mohenjo-daro, it's separately on its own. These ideas developed in Europe, and you see these models of development in Rome, in Paris, and most famously in Barcelona as well. Now, Chandigarh, in many ways, if you look at a map, you think, wow, it follows a grid system. This is great, and this is fantastic. So they got that right. But that's only one part of it. The second part of doing a grid is you have to see how your grid is, whether it is an inward looking grid or an outward looking grid. And that's the fundamental difference between the Chandigarh grid and what they did in Mohenjo-daro, or even if you look at Barcelona today. What do I mean by an outward
Like
and inward?
Manhattan as well.
Manhattan is like Barcelona. It would be, you would consider it an outward
Inward.
grid. So what do I mean by an inward grid is that the edges of the grid, that is in Chandigarh, are dead, right? You don't have any live walls. You just have gardens, garden walls are around those streets. So you don't have any activity on the edges of the street. So you don't have any retail. You don't even have gates of complexes. So if you want to enter any of those blocks, they'll have one or two entry points, and then everything else is within the grid. So all your connections are within the grid. So what that allows is that you have a very nice low level of motorization, pedestrianization within the block, right? So everything is at a walkable distance and everything is slow. You don't have too much of through movement of traffic, and that all that is good. But the moment you want to leave your block, right, and go to another block, which is essentially why you live in a city, right? You want to be able to move from one place to the other.
Right.
That's when Chandigarh becomes a hellhole, right? Because to get from even one point, even if you go from one block to another block, and if you to just cross that street, you literally have to walk like 25 minutes to come to a point where you can physically do that. And that is what defeats the purpose of living in a city, right? You want to have others, you just live in a village. If you want to only interact with the people within your residential thing, then you're living in a hamlet basically, and that's not what you want. So the advantage of the grid, that what you see in Barcelona or even in Manhattan, is that the edges are alive, right? There's a lot of
I don't know if it's the
activity.
correct technical term that I'm going to be using right now, but well, forced interaction is the wrong way to think about it, but well, maybe serendipitous interaction. So you just can't
Absolutely,
help but bump into people when you move in really
absolutely.
great cities.
Yeah, and the second thing which I got, which I think they got wrong with the Chandigarh grid, is the size of that grid, right? I mean,
It's too big
it's
for
a it's an
facilitate.
automobile user grid. It's a grid that facilitates efficient circulation of vehicular traffic, but it's a grid of, I think the scale was something like 800 meters to 1200 meters. So you have that size of block, which is definitely not a walkable block size. Whereas if you look at the Barcelona grid, if I'm not mistaken, it's around 250 meters by 250 meters. So it's a very walkable grid. Like you can, every 250 meters, which is a roughly around 3 minutes
Yeah,
walk, you come to another opportunity to cross the street. And
correct.
that's what you want. Whereas in Chandigarh, you'll have to walk 15 minutes for an opportunity to cross the road. And that's not going to encourage you to walk, right? So you can provide the best of walking boulevards and cycle tracks, and nobody's going to use them because there's nothing they can walk and cycle to. So that's what my main problem with Chandigarh is. I won't say it's the worst city to
That
live in,
Chandigarh, left,
but
right, and center, but that's just one city. Which are the
yeah.
other two cities that you think haven't done such a great job in India?
So the second city I would say is New Delhi, not old. And no, see, I need to get the term right, because so old Delhi is great. That is the Mughal Delhi. The New Delhi that the British built was fine. I mean that had some issues, but by and large fine. I'm seeing the Delhi, the urban Delhi that has developed around it. So basically, the West Delhi, the Pashchim Bihar, and all of
Mm.
those areas, including parts of South Delhi as well. I think I've got it completely wrong, because it did not take the great urban planning that was already happening in Old Delhi and the British Delhi into consideration when they developed these things. Because they developed in pockets, right? You see a lot of these developments that have happened in Delhi were a response to the urgent need of urbanization created by partition, right? So there was a lot of I'm forgetting the town, but there's this Bengali town and there's a Punjabi towns and all that.
I'm trying to recollect it, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah, within the larger Delhi. Again, they created them like hamlets inward looking to themselves, right? They don't have any interaction outside that perspective.
Correct.
And you surround them by these extremely wide roads that are impossible to cross. I mean, if you look at that ring road that is there in Delhi, it virtually carves Delhi into two parts: those that are within the ring and those that are outside the
Yeah.
ring. And that interaction between the two is almost non-existent. And to make matters worse, the development that has continued to happen, which is taking you towards Gurgaon now, Gurugram, Noida, and Faridabad, all of these developments are satellite towers. Okay, yes, but they had so much potential because they were a clean slate. You had something new to start with. You could have built a great city. Most of the development in these cities are less than 30 years old, right? And all these principles were known by them, but yet they chose to follow these outdated models of building these cities around highways and freeways.
Correct.
And if you go to a Gurgaon today, nothing is within walkable distance. It's a city that what I call a city like Gurgaon is that it looks extremely good from up when you're flying over it from air, because you say, wow, these tall buildings and these fanciful offices and all that. But you live in Gurgaon for 2 months and you want to get out of there because there's nothing you can do if you don't have your car. Right? And that's not the kind of city that you'd want to live in for a long time. Yeah.
Okay. So
The third city, sorry, and I won't go into too much detail, but third
just
city
one.
without
Yes.
further explanation is Bangalore because of how badly they screwed it up. I mean, this was probably the best city in India to live in the early
About
2000s.
15 years ago.
They
Yeah.
could not have screwed it up more by just the complete lack of planning and the complete lack of following any development norms. And I think the classic, best example to give is the choice of where they located their airport. I mean, even somebody with half a brain would have said, locate your airport between Mysore and Bangalore, where you'll get the most amount of.
That was the original plan, but then
But then political
money
reasons,
got in the way.
exactly. So it's the complete lack of an opportunity. I mean, if Bangalore had, because they had all the right people at that time to fully take advantage and become the Silicon Valley of the Eastern Hemisphere, they could have been something like what a Shanghai is today, right? It could have been that beacon of for the rest of the world. And the people had it in them. It's just the complete lack in planning that the government put forward that has screwed Bangalore's potential. I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
In the interest of time and given the amount of passion with which you've spoken about the bad cities, I think if we start talking about the good ones, the call will last for 6 hours or so. So we'll get to the good cities later. But I'm actually tempted to, if you have the time, maybe at some later date, have one episode each on these so-called bad cities.
Absolutely, we can do full series on them. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to the original list that we're building out about what we're going to talk about. So one thing was about environmental concerns. Second was about urban density. Third was about mixed-use neighborhoods. Fourth, I would want to speak to you about something that you and I have argued about very passionately in the past: the linkages between transportation and urbanization,
Hmm.
and how to go about getting good urbanization to happen, whatever good urbanization may be, because of better transport policies.
Yeah.
And given those arguments that we've had, if we start talking about it right now, I'm getting it last for at least a couple of hours. But that's
Yeah.
another thing that I would want to devote a specific episode to. And the last episode in this particular mini series, and hopefully we'll expand on the series, is a sort of summing up by asking the $1 million question: what are the principles that you need to follow in terms of making urbanization happen? And here's
Okay.
what I mean by that. So you and I can probably name around at least 10 cities that have suffered because of too much planning. Brasilia is probably the number one
Absolutely.
example in the world.
Yeah.
But we can speak about Amravati. We can speak about, I'm forgetting the name, but Myanmar's capital,
Oh
Rangoon, I
yeah.
think, right too. Yeah. So, and
After Rangoon, they built those three statues and nothing else after that.
yes, I forget the name.
They,
I'm confusing the
yeah.
names right now, but one can go on and on.
Yeah.
But it's not so much about what I want to speak about is not how to get urbanization right, but I would like to spend an episode speaking about how to not get urbanization wrong. So
That's
what
a
are the mistakes
great way
to
of
avoid
putting it. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a
would
great
be,
way of putting it
yeah. So
because
that,
there is
hmm,
no one answer on how you get it right. It's obviously you play it. The play the game in the long run, but there are definitely things that you would want to avoid doing and learning from the
Correct.
lessons that a lot of these cities that you have quoted, which they did wrong. I mean, I think we'll get to that later, but I just would put one point across
Sure.
on uh, looking at it about how do you get urban planning right, and this is especially when you're planning new developments, is unfortunately the way a lot of these developments have been thought of is that they've thought of cities as machines, right? So, and not as organisms. And I'll tell you how a machine and an organism will differentiate. Is that a machine works only when it has all its components together, when it's already a certain size. So a car, for instance, will not function as a car if it doesn't have one of its wheels. It will not function as a car without a steering wheel. So it essentially needs all of its components to really work. And that's how a lot of the way that urban planning is approached, is that okay, you need to have your airport in place, you need to have your major logistics hub and all of these big things, and only then it will work
Yeah.
like the way they envisage it to work. But that's not how great functional cities work, right? Cities grow like organisms, so
Organically. Yeah.
they are functional at different scales, right? So before New York became New York, it was a little town called New Amsterdam or whatever name it had back then. And before that, it must have been a hamlet of the First Nations people and all
Yeah.
of that. So it slowly grew out of that, and it became what it is. So if you look at London or look at all that, so
Any of
what
the
that
great cities in the world.
essentially means is that a city has to work at different scales. So in its lifetime, right? So you want, so even if you're planning for the long run, and you can look at great examples of cities that have done that long term planning. Shanghai is one good example. They have planned for different levels. So Shanghai
Yeah.
didn't become Shanghai of today just overnight. Right? It was a Shanghai of 2000 back then, and it was probably a comparative to Mumbai. And they planned for that scale, and then they planned for what they are today in 2020. So similarly, we need to do that as well. We don't need to say, okay, we'll get our great city by first putting in an airport and then having it work. It doesn't work like that. You need to
Yeah.
first plan for that thing through the processes.
Or rather, not plan for it. That's the part that I find so confusing about urbanization. Most of the great cities in the world have become great precisely because nobody planned them. So you
No,
spoke about
that is
Shanghai.
actually also misunderstood. It's not that they not planned. It's just that they have
Well, they plan at a lower
sowed the
level,
seed.
so
Yeah, they
more
sow the seed and
decentralized.
let a little of it take over. But the large plan, all the great cities are planned cities, and that's where I find it. Like a lot of people say, no, no, they weren't planned. It happened inorganically, but there were. So the London that we see today, which all the tourists go to, that is the London city I'm talking, not the London urban area, the London city, which is the
Yeah, yeah.
downtown core
Even,
of that. That is a completely planned city. It was, I forget the name of the planner, but that entire thing of how it would look and how it would be and what every part of that was planned. But it was planned well. It was planned to allow uh, the the free markets to do its thing, but the larger framework was set. So it's not that you don't need to set a larger. You need to set the rules, and you set the broad framework for development to happen, and then let it happen sporadically. So you don't want too much control, and but at the same time you don't want to have completely no control. Otherwise, you'll end up with Bangalore. The Bangalore is a classic example where the free market was doing its thing. It was
right.
creating offices all over the place, but planning couldn't keep up, right? And now planning is trying to play catch up, and that's just not going to work out. So I disagree with this thing of people saying that too much planning is a bad thing. It's just that you plan the right things and leave the rest to the free market. Don't plan what job should come, but plan a framework to let the jobs come. I mean, you don't leave it to that extent.
Hmm. Okay, so it's a line of thought that I hadn't thought about before, but I guess the one episode that I'll be looking forward to the most is the final one, where what is the right amount of planning and knowing when to stop is
There is no right answer to
said and
that,
done. Yeah, correct.
but
But we'll see how we go.
yeah,
All right. So in the next episode, we'll speak about the environmental concerns of urbanization. And I think I'm going to take a opposing point of view to what you're going to say, not because uh, I want to argue with you, but because I think there is something to be said for how cities are actually good for the environment rather than bad. But we'll see how that discussion goes.
yeah. I mean, I don't fully disagree with you, but I think what my point is some of the aspects of cities are bad for the environment. It's a negative
Sure.
externality which we can choose to live with. but it's no way arguing around it. I mean, cities do cause those problems.
Yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
thinking of the opportunity cost. Had those cities not been there, would the
Absolutely.
problem have
Yeah,
been
yeah.
worse? Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, would it have been
okay,
worse? Oh, that's an interesting point. And I'd like to hear from you of
exactly.
how it
So,
could have been worse. Yeah.
so in the
Yeah.
next episode, we'll speak about this and then speak about each of the other things that we just listed out right now.
Sounds good.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Binoy, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, and see you next time.
All right, bye.
All right. Bye. Are we done?
Going in 3, 2, 1.